So, everybody, we are here with the final interview for post season 1 of Fire in the Dark, and I am joined by the GM mastermind themselves, Jaimie Wolf.
Hello, everybody.
So, Jaimie, I know who you are, but for our audience, who are you? Where can we find you? And what do you do?
Hi, I'm Jaimie Wolf. I'm an artist and a variety streamer. You can find me on Twitch as twitch.tv/Jaimie Wolf, Jaimie spelled with two I's and Wolf spelled with an E at the end. You can also find me on Twitter as Jaimie Wolf Art, where you can find me doing various posts and occasionally actually throwing my art up there when I feel confident enough to put it in the public eye. Beyond that, I am the GM for Fire in the Dark, obviously. That's why I'm here. And I'm mod across Twitch, and you can find me in a variety of TTRPG spaces.
And all of those links and things will be in our show notes. And along with that, Jaimie's my internet twin, so I'm enjoying the fact that I get to interview Jaimie for 2 hours. Or however long this is.
However long this is. Brandon and I can just talk anyway, so it's like,
yeah,
it depends how it goes.
So starting off, let's talk about Blades in the Dark, because you and I had the benefit of already knowing this game before this show started. Where did you first hear about it, and what got you into Blades in the Dark?
So, as you're probably aware, you specifically, Brandon, but for everyone else, Brandon and I played in a game of Blades in the Dark, and that was my first game of Blades in the Dark. I have a rule about running games. Even as a forever GM, I prefer to like to play in them before I run them. It gives me a better rundown of the mechanics and things like that. So when it comes to Blades in the Dark, prior to running it for Fire in the Dark on the show, I have only played the game in one campaign, kind of a thing. You could call it a campaign. What we did was honestly more akin to a series of single-off adventures that eventually culminated in its own thing. It was friends getting together on a Monday night and just playing a game, having a few drinks, and enjoying being scoundrels in a dark fantasy city. So that was me. I got introduced to it by Commander Poltzar, who runs Denari's Half Dozen on here on Huntsmen's Hydra. But beyond that, that was kind of my own experience. And it was with Brandon. Brandon and I kind of jumped into it at the same time together. And I never looked back. It's still one of my favorite systems. It will continue to be one of my favorite systems. I absolutely enjoy it, from the lore to the system itself. I think that the D6 system that it runs on is pretty neat, and I like the way that it works. I like the narrative kind of flow of it and how it works, as opposed to like more of a hardcore strategic battle system, tactical combat like D&D or Warhammer kind of is. Whereas it's a storytelling game. And D&D is... Blades in the Dark is a storytelling game that you can occasionally do combat adjacent things in. D&D is a combat game that you tack story onto. That's not a bad thing. You can build phenomenal stories in D&D, but D&D is a combat game first, and Blades in the Dark and any of the Forged in the Dark systems really are a story-driven, narrative-driven focus.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it was also funny, I was talking with Rue during their interview, and they actually learned Blades because their D&D GM said they wanted to do a heist. So it was so much easier to just run it in Blades rather than Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, we both got into Blades at the same time. And then back in December, you came to me with the pitch for Fire in the Dark.
Yeah, it was the end of 2021 kind of a thing. It was back when Huntsmen's Hydra was starting to get started. There'd been a couple other shows that had done a couple of short runs on Huntsmen's Hydra at that point, but I kind of came in and I was like, hey, I had an idea. I don't know if there's anything to this, but I had an idea.
And so I'm going to skip over the how dare you. As much as I love this question, Also, all of these questions are from our players that I told them when we were interviewing Jaimie, and they just sent me their list. So,
So, like, to
what?
answer how dare you, though, it was
Yeah,
very easily. Y'all didn't see any of that shit coming.
no, they really didn't. They really didn't.
They really didn't.
But pulling back to when you first sent me this pitch, what motivated you to do this story on a stream?
So, why did I want to stream this game?
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, this is my first streamed game. Not, I have done live stream one shots for charity almost exclusively before this. I started doing those back in the end of 2020, basically. Started doing some charity one-off things for like over on D&D Jordan Lee's channel or Nix's channel, and like just, you know, testing the waters. What motivated me to do this story on this stream was this really was the test where I was like, can I tell a limited frame story in a limited format in front of a live audience? Here's the thing. Can I keep the beats of making it still feel like a good game, like I'm telling a good game and telling a good story while limiting myself to the, let's call it the nuances of a streamed game of an actual play? Because in the grand scheme of things, when you're doing an actual play, the point is to have a fun game and to have a good time with your players and stuff, but it is also to tell a story in a concise fashion. How concise that is can be dependent on the story you're trying to tell. You can get things like Critical Role that can go for 100+ episodes telling this long-winded epic campaign that builds on these like grand adventures and scenarios, or you can do something like Fire in the Dark. It's a bite-sized snapshot of a larger world. And I thought that that was kind of the best place to start, was that because the reason I wanted to do this on a stream was because I only had like so much story I wanted to tell here. I didn't have like in sometimes when I run D&D, I have a basic story and then I run off of that and I just keep going and going and going until like I find a nice place to end it in the campaign. But with this, it was like I had the story I wanted to tell and I wanted to tell it. And it seemed like Huntsman's Hydra and stream seemed like a good place to do that, while also branching out a little bit from my own personal comfort zone.
So then, specifically talking about Fire in the Dark, what made you want to focus on a story around drugs, and like where did that idea for Pyro come from?
Okay, that is a little interesting. The reason I wanted to focus on a story around drugs wasn't about drugs specifically, is the thing. It doesn't really have to do with drugs as a whole. Personally, I'm not a fan. I'm an advocate for legalization and rehabilitation of most drugs and things of that. But when it comes to that, the drugs isn't the point of the story. The point of the story and the reason that and the way that the drug focused is the drug represents something. It represents, in this case, quite literally, like there's not even a lot of nuance here, power. It is just power by another name, power by another form. So the story I wanted to tell here was about power. There's a story about what people will do to grasp power and how power is redistributed and where power really rests. And then you can do that through a very physical medium of something like a drug like pyro. Now, for where the idea of pyro itself came from, that is kind of a mix of ideas that came. If you can't tell by the fact that pyro's original name is Formula 451, part of it does stem from the book Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 is a classic dystopian novel. I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in that kind of genre. If you are a fan of things like Brave New World or 1984, Fahrenheit 451 is a fantastic book looking at the narrative of censorship and when something goes too far. Now, for the idea for pyro specifically, though, is a little bit of Fahrenheit 451. But the vast majority of the idea of these criminalized fire users came from one of my absolute favorite pieces of media, Promare. Promare is an anime movie. It's not like it's not a series. It is a movie that is an hour and 45 minutes long. It tells the whole story that it's trying to tell in that hour and 45 minutes, and it's very good. And I very much enjoy it from an artist perspective, from color theory and visuals and all that. It's a beautiful piece of work. But from a storytelling perspective, the way that it does it and the way that methods of power are criminalized in order to control people and to further someone else's agenda, and how that the moral nuance versus the law versus morality, and that kind of idea. And the idea of that, like, just because something illegal is illegal doesn't mean it's amoral, and just because something is legal doesn't mean it is moral. And that kind of idea. So that was kind of a lot of the inspiration for Pyro itself. And then for the like actual idea of the glowing vial and the way that it comes, that stems from a different favorite movie of mine. Repo the Genetic Opera. Yes, that's it. Yes. I was trying to remember, because there's you got to remember, there's Repo the Genetic Opera and there's Repo Man. Repo Man is a horror film. Repo the Genetic Opera is a campy gothic comedy. Repo the Genetic Opera. That was the inspiration for the actual drug itself and the idea of the drug. So if you take all of these elements together, where you've got social structures and powerful hierarchies and mix that with drugs and fire, you get Pyro. And that's kind of where all of my influences came from to stem at this point, because as you can guess, I pitched this to Brandon in December, end of November, December. Right on the back of October, I literally just rewatched Repo the Genetic Opera. I had just seen Promare for the first time, and I had actually just reread Fahrenheit 451 a few months earlier, and consciously and subconsciously, it all just kind of amalgamated into this.
Into this lovely story that we've gotten to experience over 8 episodes.
Indeed.
Stepping back a little bit, and this kind of, I have seen you GM Fire in the Dark, and I also had the pleasure of being in a home game with you, plus Microscope and everything else that we do. What has influenced your style of storytelling?
What has influenced my style of storytelling? That's a great question, actually, because it's really no one thing at this juncture of the road, as you can guess. So trying to say it in a concise manner is very difficult, but here are kind of the highlights. I grew up from a very young age reading fantasy stories. Before I could even read, one of my grandmothers would read me these classic encyclopedias of fantasy that she had, of just these, they were basically just fantasy encyclopedias and stories and the likes, and it really, like, something clicked in my brain with that, and then I just started reading fantasy stories, and it was my favorite. And when I hit around the age of 12, I was like, okay, well, I want to start trying to write my own stories and that kind of a thing, as usually when you're an avid reader, you sometimes are wont to do. And I did. I started writing. I wrote a variety of things that are absolute garbage to look back on, but it make me laugh, because it's like I see how much I've grown from them. And I read them and I'm like, this is nonsense, but I see what I was going for. I can see how the ideas and like the skill building started there. And then from there, my style of storytelling kind of obviously evolved based on the media I consumed. However, I didn't start playing TTRPGs until I got to college. And in terms of verbal storytelling and kind of how that works in a TTRPG sense, I played a little bit of TTRPG with some guys at my college, and then I basically like immediately started GMing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Like almost immediately fell into the GM role, and just kind of started going with that. And from there, the biggest influence on my style of storytelling was throwing things at the wall seeing what worked, seeing what didn't.
Mhm.
A lot of the influences from outside, people that I learned from, I mean, it's stereotypical to say this, but like Matthew Mercer and Matthew Colville, I watched a
Yep.
lot of their videos on GMing tips from both ends. And just they have two very different styles. And so I would pick and choose what I liked from theirs. I would watch actual plays, people like Brennan Lee Mulligan, Abria Iyengar. And from there, those would have a lot of influence on me. But the biggest influence on my style of storytelling to where I am now,
Mhm.
honestly, probably comes from a place of media analysis, looking at things and looking at what is the point of the story they're trying to tell. So a lot
Mhm.
of the time of when I read a book, I look at what kind of story are they trying to tell, and why are they trying to tell that story in this manner? Why is this the medium? And kind of hitting the key points of what are the genre. And one of the things that like one of the glass shattering things for me was I used to tell stories, like I've always liked telling dark fantasy style stories. You can
Mhm.
test that outside of Fire in the Dark, even my D&D games and the like, they tend to veer on the side of darker themes. And I like,
Literally, all of us are basically undead.
yeah, no, it's, well, that was your own doing. That's not on me. But I like to stray in the realm of dark things, dark fantasy, gothic fantasy, terror, dread, and that kind of thing. What shattered the glass for me, though, was a couple of years ago, I was running a game that is still a game that I remember fondly, is a game that had impact on my personal homebrew D&D world, and has
Mhm.
had long-lasting consequences in that realm and field. But the people that were in their game, at one point, one of them, one of my partners came up to me and had to like sit down and explain to me that we had been doing too much dark shit back to back to back to back without any kind of payoff, without any kind
Mhm.
of joy. And it really and really kind of hit the narrative wall for me, and I realized, oh, the thing that makes a dark story is there has to be the light that reflects it. You can't, if everything's dark, then there are no shadows. There is
Mhm.
only darkness, and you
Yep.
get lost in it. The thing that makes gothic fantasy, the thing that makes dark fantasy what it is, ultimately is hope. Whether
Mhm.
the players have hope, whether the players are the hope, or whether the players can see something that is on the horizon that represents hope. There has to
Mhm.
be hope, no matter what dark story you're telling, no matter what dark fantasy, no matter what evil twists you bring in to break your poor little players' hearts. There has to be hope on the other side of the horizon. You have to make the players' victories mean something. You have to
Mhm.
make it so that even if it is as simple as a thank you from the small child that you managed to save from a horrendous monster, even if everything else is terrible, even if you are losing, even if the big bad has conquered your city, even if everyone is downtrodden, if in that moment you're able to show joy, you're able to show hope, you're able to have made a difference in the darkness,
Mhm.
that is what makes a dark fantasy and a gothic fantasy better and interesting from something that is just dark all the time.
Mhm.
It goes from being a dark fantasy, and all that to just like it's just what's the word for it? Horror porn or uh
Yeah.
um uh it's
Or something
hopelessness.
along the, yeah,
Yeah, it's
hopelessness.
other hopelessness.
Yeah.
You just it has no point at that point. The reason
Mhm.
is there has to be a light in the darkness. There has to be that flicker of a candle to represent, and
Mhm.
that really was what ultimately was like turned my storytelling thing on a pivot at that point, where I realized, oh, okay, and then really helped me like streamline and focus into the kinds of stories I wanted to tell and the kinds of things I wanted to represent. The other aspect of this, and trust me, I can talk about storytelling all day, so I'll try to keep this brief. the other aspect of this is I am a big fan of character-driven stories.
Mm-hmm.
Your overarching plot can be as generic and predictable as you want. Generally, you try to be a little better than that, but you can have your general heist plot, something that could be ripped straight out of Ocean's 11 and the like. But the characters, their motivations, their personal stories, and things like that, that I think is what is the driving juice in making a good, lasting impression, especially in a TTRPG setting. It's also important when you're like writing a book or telling those kinds of stories, but from a TTRPG sense, the players are here to play their character.
Yep.
When you start a game, they're already invested in in their own character. They're not necessarily invested in the story you're trying to tell. So if you take that character and you start tying it into your overarching story and you start making it a part of it, they are going to get so much more invested in the story you are telling, their own character, and everyone else's character if you work from a character-driven perspective. That's why when it comes to things like Fire in the Dark and my other games that I run, I start by making a general idea, and then I get everyone's backstories, and I start building off of that and using their backstories to build the rest of the game.
Which
yeah,
is always excellent as someone who's experienced it and gotten to watch it.
Thank you.
Let's see. So before we dive into Fire in the Dark itself, let's go back to session 0. So let's switch things around a bit. Let's say you're not in the GMing seat.
Okay.
We'll say it's me in the seat. It doesn't really matter. You are a part of the Murmur Venture Project. What playbook do you play?
Oh, that's a good question. So
you at least know what everybody else is playing.
Right. Working off the assumption that everyone else is playing the same thing that they are playing now. So we have a Lurk as played by Parker. We have the Cutter played by John. We have the Spider played by our wonderful Ice Cold Rue. We have the Whisper played by Rue. In that event, so normally my favorite playbook is the Whisper. Don't get me wrong. I love all of the playbooks, but I'm a sucker for a Whisper. I just like my spooky, creepy stuff. I love Dishonored. Brandon knows this. I'm a big fan of the Dishonored series. Had a large impact on how I tell the story of Duskfall as a whole. Not necessarily on Fire in the Dark, but on Duskfall. Yes, there's the Corvo mask in your background. So I am a big fan of that kind of like creepy. However, I don't think that the gang would need 2 Whispers. Don't get me wrong. You can have a gang of entirely Lurks or entirely Cutters. It's fully doable, and every character would be different. They would all be unique. But I don't think that I would have needed to play a Whisper given Crow and the phenomenal things that Rue did with Silas. Personally, if that was the group they were going to play with, I probably would have played a Leech.
Yes.
I probably would have played a Leech. Leech, for those who don't know, being the Tinker Tailor kind of individual. And I would have specifically probably played a Leech with a bending towards fleshcraft kind of a thing. Alchemy, stitching, slight bend towards the arcane, something. So I would have been kind of the group's doctor in a way, but like in a very wild experimental scientist kind of, I'm going to see what this does and stick them with a formula. Granted, I am a little bit influenced on that based on what everyone else is already playing and what I know about the story. I have a prediction, but being able to play a Leech with an interest in formula and alchemy in a game and a focus where there is all of these the overarching story has to do with a formula and the likes, that just, it would have been very interesting, and I think would have added some narrative nuance. It's why I was kind of hoping that someone would play a Leech when it came to them making their characters. Don't get me wrong, I adore everyone's characters. I was a little disappointed when we didn't get a Leech.
No, 100%. And honestly, I really want to see you play that now. At some point, just because as the leech of our group, I like seeing how other people take that Tinker style character and what direction
Oh
they go
yeah,
with.
and it definitely would have been a little bit more of a flesh grafter style.
Yeah.
Like this is the kind of character that when I picture them, it'd be like by the end of the end when you start towards the end of season one. Is like I've worked out how to graft different body parts onto myself. Like maybe I've given myself some scales, so get an armor
Yeah.
bonus at some point, or I have got an extra pair of arms that I keep hidden for most of the time, but I use just for getting work done.
Yeah. Things of that nature. I immediately also thought of the extra arms.
That's because you and I are very similar in that fashion of like wanting to do multiple things at once.
Well, also that, and I'm thinking of the Hunt, who has 4 arms.
The Hunt does have 4 arms when he's in his. Actually, when the Hunt is in his fully powered form, he has 6, but he only got to 4.
Good to know. So now we can actually talk about the show. All of these were just questions that I felt like fit our generic talk. So starting off, maybe something easy. Who was your favorite NPC to get into?
Okay. So this one is a little bit of this one's a bit of a cheat in terms of that, but it was Archie. And the reason for that is because I knew who Archie was and no one else did. And getting to be in that vein, in that perspective of being that master manipulator who is so in his role that the role has become another person almost. There is a lot of fun in that in the like the GMing joy of like I'm going to fuck these people up so bad, especially with every moment of them getting more and more and more attached to Archie. Like watching it happen, I was like, you're making this so much worse for yourself than I ever could. So Archie, however, setting aside Archie for the unique bastard man that he was and is, I would say that my other favorite character to actually get into character it wasn't Rick. I'm sorry, don't get me wrong. I love Rick.
That's
He's
fine.
great. You know, love to come in and fuck some shit up. It's what I do. Rick was great, but it actually was Jay, the Blue Jay from the flock.
Yes.
I am a big fan of Jay. Jay is everything that I normally do in how I make my charismatic characters shoved into one person, where he's kind of an asshole, but supposed to be in a lovable kind of sense. He's supposed to be can talk to anyone, get you anything to a degree. He's supposed to be that kind of narrative focus of like the classic con man who wants to be your best friend to your face, but is always working another angle. I love Jay. Jay has so much. There's so much to Jay, and he's so fun to play. But he is bright smile, and always a good time.
I love that little bird.
Yeah, Jay's a problem.
Little bird bastard. All right. Let's see. And I talked about this across like a couple of different of these interviews. I can't wait for season 2 to see more of the flock. And like Jay was one of my main picks for that. Because lovable bastards. And
lovable bastard that he is.
And like with most of your NPCs, save for the ones that you make purely to be disgusted and feel disgusted playing them, I love getting to see you like be in your element with someone like Jay, where you're just like, this is my shit. I'm here and y'all have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Kind of like also when Echo. Like when Echo shows up.
Echo is a whole nother layer of bastard. Echo, they have all their own problems. Echo, for those of you who don't know, Echo was the character that I played in the Blades in the Dark game that we talked about earlier, that Brandon and I, that we first started in. The Damned and that whole group is based off of the group that we were. And I just took them and put them in my Duskfall as another faction, because why wouldn't I? I loved playing that game, and I would absolutely love to bring those characters back into the world as NPCs. Is the thing. It's the same thing is going to ultimately happen for future games that I run in Duskfall, is that the Murmur Venture Project, whether or not they continue to be called that, no matter what form they take, are probably going to also eventually be NPCs in my Duskfall. So
trust me, as someone who's already doing it, it's been pretty fun. So, you want to start broad or narrow?
Let's start broad, work our way down.
Okay. So, in that case, out of all, not the finale, what was your favorite job of season 1?
Ooh. The finale was fun, don't get me wrong, but I think my favorite job was probably infiltrating the Plague Doctors.
Okay.
That was personally a very fun, very favorite. I really liked the energy of that one. It just went so well. Alternatively, I would also say episode 2 with the party. The party was just the party was great because it really hit the highlights of what everyone's built to do. Everyone really got to see what their character could do in that, and from a GM perspective above things, to see your players have fun and to see each of them kind of hit their specialty and own the room in some way or another, that brings its own joy. From a story perspective and from what happened, the Plague Doctor heist, hands down, of just the ridiculous things that happened there, from Tristero literally spending the entire heist in a hospital bed, to the closet scene, to our beloved Crow ending up in a lab working on fucking various poisons and medicines as a lab assistant, and just being so over it and like, this is my day job, why am I doing this now?
See, I do have notes for like each of the episodes, and my one for episode 4, which is the Plague Doctor one, is, so how did it feel only having 2 players for that whole episode?
Honestly, you say that, but Tristero was a large part of it in
100%.
Unfortunately, Mort was not there because that was one of the episodes John had to take off. But so we were down a cutter, which honestly for the infiltration worked a little better. And then we put Tristero in a hospital bed for the whole thing. So it really was the Crow and Specter show. It was the Silas and Asher special. And you know, as someone who has run a Blades in the Dark game for one person, there's something different about the number of people in any given job. That said, Silas and Asher could not have done what they did but for Tristero's batshit plan that was to put himself into a fucking hospital bed with a bad batch of Murmur.
That whole thing. And actually, that brings up a point Rue brought up yesterday for me. Talking about Murmur real quick. Because I know the party doesn't know the full extent of... They know generically what it does, but like they can't make it.
Right. That was Archie's job.
He
made it.
So like, does Murmur have any long-lasting effects on the body?
Murmur was developed. So the effect that Murmur has, where it does that kind of good reverie, good bringing up a good memory, that kind of thing, to kind of give that boost, honestly was a side effect of its original intent. Murmur was created by Archie as a distillation to help him start working on perfecting Formula 451. It is, at this point, Murmur currently serves as instead. So you remember how in the season at various points there were different liquids that were being used as the base for different versions of Pyro. There was the saltwater base that made for the more unstable version, but more violent one. There was the generic water base that made for the stable, normal version of Pyro. There was a base. There was a version of it that they never interacted with because it never became relevant, but there was a version of it that worked, tried I should say, tried to work with Leviathan's blood as the base, just pure Leviathan's blood as the base.
Okay.
That one did not work well. It caused this never became they never had to do anything with this. But that one actually caused violent mutations.
Oh. Hmm.
Yeah, violent mutations, and almost always ended in some form of spontaneous combustion after one use. Was the thing. So that was, a failure. Murmur was created to be a distillation to serve as the base for Formula
Oh.
451 Omega instead of water or salt water or Leviathan blood or any other chemical base. It is the basis. However, the initial experiments of using just Murmur as a base didn't necessarily pan out. That's why it took as long as it did to get where he did. And while he was working on that, allowed Archie used the Murmur Venture Project to clean up his experimental strafe, what was left over from his early days of experimenting with this drug. What ultimately led to his breakthrough was because of the party, however, when they brought that formula from Skurlock with the modified Murmur that he and his paramour and the Shrike and all them had made, that caused the almost failed version of Murmur that always caused bad memories instead of good, which they brought to him, and he used as a base, and realized that the spiritual vector that was put into it by Skurlock worked as a better vector for carrying it, which is why the red version of Omega has that black snake-like smoke thing that seems to be alive in it. So what that does is, in the way that it works, is that he worked out that, they had put in a spiritual factor that targets a specific portion of the brain. Once he figured out how to do that, it wasn't a matter of recreating that result particularly. It was a matter of getting it to target the specific part of the brain he wanted it to. And so when he could get that in there, in conjunction with the Murmur as a base, and then distill it through the rest of the formula of Pyro, it led to Formula 451 Omega.
Omega. AKA kindling, is that correct?
Kindling, yeah.
Yeah. The reason I ask this is because Rue is speculating that Murmur may, for people who use it in long term, may become more easily influenced due to them being in this like nostalgia state. So, just have that crumb, do whatever you want with it. I'm here to
No one knows the long-term effects of Murmur use at this point.
Nope.
No one has any way to think about the long-term effects of Murmur use at this point.
Nope.
But there are long-term effects, I will say that.
Yep, there it is. So sorry, Rue, I tried. So we're back at highlights. We did favorite episodes. How about favorite story beats or moments, however you want to take this?
Okay. So story beats is the thing. For Fire in the Dark, we love, everyone loves a finale. Everyone loves a climax. Everyone's loves the big showiness. But setting that aside, my personal favorite story beat in this is specifically rising action. Rising action being when things really start to take off. And in Fire in the Dark, that moment starts at episode 4, where Archie goes, "Hey, we're making money now, and I gave everyone just an immediate payout at the beginning of the session," kind of a thing. Welcome to and this was almost my signal of welcome to rising action. Things are ramping up. Episodes 4, 5, 6, 7. From here, things are gonna, basically go in an upward angle, and things are gonna start connecting together in the dots. And that really kind of the rising action or the rising potential energy and the rising consequences of that. The story beat is really well hit by the episode with Wick in it, where they literally blew up a building. If you wanted a pure representation of energy going too far, going further than it needs to, a bomb causing a building collapse and killing 40 plus people is a really, really good representation of that.
That is very fair. And actually, since you brought up the Wick episode, I've asked everybody on the crew this. How did it feel adding a? We've talked about this forever, but how did it feel adding a fifth member to the crew?
It actually felt pretty good for the most part. It wasn't that unmanageable for me. I think I've told this story to you before, but to put it out in the universe, my first D&D game, which was my first TTRPG I ever ran, had 9 players in it, and that was too much. And it gave me a little bit of trauma around it. So I try to limit my tables to not including the GM 4 players max at this point.
Yeah.
And I still like that number. I still try to keep it at a healthy 4 players. I try not to go beyond that. 5 is pushing it, but I will do it specifically to get some people involved when I need to and the like. But I prefer to keep it at 4 players. Adding the 5th element, adding that, I guess, for that explosive little mystery to element to it all was definitely a joy. And of course, it was a little easier in here because I'm familiar with Wick. I know Wick's character. I've played with you before. I know what you're like. I know what you're like playing Wick. Even in this case of playing several years in the future Wick, who is a little more jaded than the Wick that I remember. A little more office rocker in some respects.
Yeah. Unstable, if you will.
Unstable. And a little more, or rather say a little less of a people person than he used to be.
Which he really wasn't at the beginning, so it's only gone downhill from here.
No, so it's the fact that he's even like, it's kind of that thing of like his Wick is like, he comes out of his lab like to interact with people like once a month, and he's like, all right, that's good. I'm good for me. Back to my lab. So like, I appreciated Wick. I appreciated having him for that session. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a great session. It was not, having a 5th person was not overwhelming. That said, I still, just for personal reasons, try to keep it a 4.
Oh, yeah. But in the case of looking at maybe 1 episode of season 2, and of course,
maybe 2 episodes of season 2, I would more than be happy to welcome guests and guest characters. We have talked about this a little bit and potential guests. So look forward to the future for anyone who's interested that we may have some fun few friends joining us here or there for an episode or 2.
And for the cast who is gonna watch this because they're dying for this interview right now, that was me making sure it was recorded, so that way y'all knew that we had already talked about this. So you're welcome.
I have ideas for guests. We'll be reaching out to them, obviously, but that's a future us problem.
We're taking time off after this, so like
we're on break. One of us is getting married and going on a honeymoon. Like we got shit to do. We got shit to do, and we got planning to do. We got a whole session 0 we got to do for season 2, and like getting things prepped. And season 2 is taking place several months in the future from the finale, so like things have changed in Duskfall.
Which we'll get to that. We're still in season 1. We talked about this during our decompress, but to kind of put it out in the open for our audience, talking about season 1 overall, and best way to put this: favorite moment for each character.
For each character, so having time to kind of reflect on it, and including the finale with this, because I am going to do that. I think for each character, it really is pretty unique across the board. For Silas, for Rue's character Crow, it really is that first time interacting with the flock. Because prior to that session, I had given Rue basically a little dossier on, hey, this is what you know about the flock. This is, the crew you used to be a part of. Keep this in mind when y'all are going to go interact with them. And they took that and they just ran with it. And the way that they chose to interact with everyone, it was so personable, and it really felt like they had just been a member of this crew for a long time prior to leaving and joining the Murmur Venture Project. it was really fun to interact with them in that moment and to see them kind of shine.
Mhm.
For Mort, I gotta say, I think it really comes down to that confrontation with his father in the
Yep.
finale. I absolutely like the way that whole scene worked out. Like, if there was a
Mhm.
scene that I could have animated and watch, like
Mhm.
that fight with Tristero in the background and Specter, Asher, like starting with Asher in the background and Asher going, "You got this. You've got this handled. I'm gonna go." And then switching, and like the fight continues to rage on with the like various, and then Tristero comes down and is like, "You good, buddy?" Gunshot goes off. All right, okay. And Tristero goes in, starts opening a safe, gathering up some maps. There's building is literally falling apart around him. Fire
Mhm.
alarms going, and just and just like we would flash back and forth between Mort and his father, just beating the shit, literally tearing each other apart with monstrous claws
Yep.
at various points. And we just, at various times, just like as that's happening, it'd be like that scene when the first Avengers movie of Hulk and like breaking through the library and
Mhm.
Stan Lee's just there, just like mopping. We just
Yep.
flash back to Tristero just doing that, like marking some stuff on a map, opening a safe, just that scene. If I could have a scene animated, if I could have a scene that with like a score to it, like music,
Mhm.
everything, that scene. I love that scene for Mort and overall. For Tristero, my God, if I could have a scene of Tristero, it's either just his entire experience in that hospital bed in episode
Yeah.
4. That would
Yeah.
be very funny to watch. Or his confrontation with Mother Narya.
Yep.
That one, because I did not have that planned, obviously, because I didn't know what he was going to do for
Mhm.
his downtime or the
Yep.
consequences of him overindulging his vice until we got there. I didn't have that planned, but then the way that it rolled out and how perfectly it worked for his story, it just absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
As for Spectre, the closet scene has to come up as a classic memory, of course, but
Yeah.
when it comes to Spectre, I really think that episode 7 and
Mhm.
what happened with her eye, really, because again, that was an
Yeah.
idea that kind of came from the group with a combination of me and Cole and uh, Parker all kind of like talking
Mhm.
together in that moment and the way that just panned out. I really love how that scene and the repercussions that kind of had, kind of looking into the next bit of what happened into episode 8 and how
Yep.
Spectre now can look into people's auras and kind of the things around
Mhm.
them, and how that now spiraled into with episode at the end of episode 8 and the finale of how that loss of trust, and how I know Parker probably talked about it on her interview, but I know has talked about it with me, of how like everyone's getting the eye now. She ain't
Yeah.
trusted like that anymore. She's analyzing everyone's auras.
So, would they have figured out something was up with Archie if they had looked?
No,
Okay.
no. His aura does not portray. If they looked at Archie's aura,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have given it away.
Okay.
In fact, they probably would have thought it was very sweet.
That's sad, actually. Um. Well, yeah, because we talked about that, and
Hmm. Yeah.
it's it's one of those things. Asher won't feel better about it, but maybe Parker will. Maybe, who knows?
Who's to
Um,
say? No,
who's
that
to
eye. If
say?
looked at Archie, you wouldn't have gotten the damn thing. In
Mm.
fact, you probably would have thought it was one of the sweetest things you'd ever seen in your life prior to the betrayal.
Oh goodness. Oh goodness, that makes it so much worse. Um, and then let's see. I've talked about these individually with the group, but like kind of working backwards. For me, Spectre's my favorite moment with Spectre was definitely episode 3 when they went out to the Deathlands.
That the
And and you
breaking the
were just
safe.
like, there's a safe. And the entire personality shifted, and the only focus was that safe. And I was like, this is our lurk, and I love them so much.
It was so good. I do love that scene. It's a really good scene. That
Um,
entire scene with that monster in the Deadlands of
mhm,
like was another good portrayal of what everyone was capable
yep.
of.
That's the one that I think I want to say it was Cole who said this, but like if you could actually it was kind of Parker, Cole, and Rue all said something similar. If you could take a single scene, much like you think with the party, if you could take a single scene where everyone is in the same room,
Hmm.
all doing what they're meant to do, that is the scene to do it in.
Oh yeah, no, you got Rue who's trying to like with Crow trying to communicate with it, and when that's not
Mhm.
working, trying to like open up a door, a ghost door to get
Mhm.
out. You got Asher, who Specter, who's like stole the thing in the first place, is trying to get it
Yep.
out and then got distracted by the safe. You've
Yep.
got Mort, who is literally wrangling the damn thing.
Yep.
And then you've got Tristero, who's trying to like coordinate everything and like keep everything one calm and like give directions and like
While
fortify everyone else.
while wearing the priest robes
Yep, while
that
wearing the priest
he
robes.
yeah, they randomly found to try and commune with it. Yeah, so like for Crow slash Silas, that was obviously my pick was Silas talking to the monster. But then also Lunch with Jay was my other one because it was just very cute.
Mhm.
Um Mort for me was definitely like I want a painted shot of like the first time meeting the hunt and the last time meeting the hunt and do like the cross section down the middle of those two and just see the differences in those characters. And then Tristero, it's got to be the speech in episode 6
Yeah.
for me. Um, Mainly because Wick and Mort are both like trying to drag him out of there at this point. Because Wick's like, we got 30 seconds, dude. Like, can we go?
Yeah.
um, it's
That
just,
bomb's gonna go off.
and I ain't gonna be here. Um, that episode was so good. Thank you for letting me play. That episode was so
Absolutely.
good. um, but yeah, so we've hit favorite episodes, favorite moments, favorite story beats.
Mhm.
Let's talk about things that did or did not happen.
Sure.
Maybe there was an unexplored thread.
There
If there
was.
is it your favorite? And what was it? If you want to talk about it.
So the unexplored thread, obviously,
Mhm.
was to go a completely different route with the Greyhounds, or the Foghounds. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, don't get me wrong. I love the Deadlands. I love what
Mhm.
they did with that. I think that is an exemplar episode. I think I had a lot of fun. I would not change a damn thing. Obviously, there is another path they could have gone down
Yeah.
where they let the Foghounds die, where they help where or they do it themselves on behalf of the hunt, take them out,
Yeah.
help Mort take them down for the hunt. That was an unexplored thread that would have had repercussions going down. From
Yep.
there, it would have colored their interaction with Skurlock and what he expected from them. He
Mhm.
likely wouldn't have asked them to steal something. He might have actually asked them to kill someone. Um,
Yep.
Further than that, if they go further down that road, the interactions they would have probably had, so they showed up in session 0, was not on
Mhm.
screen, but the
Yep.
Dimmer Sisters is one of my favorite groups in Duskfall and one of my
We
favorite
did
gangs.
we did get one interaction with the Dimmer sisters on screen.
We did get one manner interaction in a downtime with
Yeah.
Crow and Echo.
Yep.
But the Dimmer Sisters are one of my favorite, and they, for off screen, when we did our session 0 with everyone, we did a test job, kind of the implementation of the group, which was
Mhm.
with the Dimmer Sisters, where they stole something on behalf of the Dimmer Sisters from the Foghounds in order to get something for Archie that was actually the thing he needed to purify Murmur in the first place, and the
Mhm.
reason he hired them in the first place at all. Everything that happened after that, that is to say, all of season 1, was
Mhm.
basically superfluous for the sake of Archie.
Yep.
Um, but regardless, anything to do with the Dimmer sisters, that would have been a completely different route if they'd gone the more occult, esoteric side of things, if they leaned heavier into their relationship with the Hunt and leaned heavier into their relationship with Scarlock, it would have led to more interaction with the Dimmer sisters. We would have had a completely different route when it came down to various things in terms of the firebugs. Frankly, I probably wouldn't have been in the best interest to actually have Wick come in. I would have had you.
Yeah.
Or I actually, honestly, probably would have asked your wife to come play a Dimmer sister.
Yeah,
and
that
then,
tracks.
And have it would have changed the color of things. So.
Yeah. Okay, but now I need Mariah to play a Dimmer sister.
Maybe. Again, things to be discussed in the future.
I mean, also it doesn't have to be on stream. I just meant in general. I need this fair. Now.
Anyway. So yeah, there are unexplored threads, and a lot of them do go down that more occult esoteric route, which is my favorite part of most storytelling. So
yeah,
am I sad about it? No, not really. I really like what they did. I really like what they decided to do, and I love how the characters decide to run things, and I put the jobs in front of them that best fit what they were going for and what worked best for them.
Yep. And then kind of peeking at the interviews that I've been doing, since no one else in the cast has seen them except for me. I think you're gonna get more of your what you normally enjoy in season 2. I think you're gonna get a little more weird.
I'm counting on it, given the weirdness that surrounds the various characters that make up the Kindled.
I mean, yes, you're gonna get more weird just from you having your villains, but I mean, also your crew seems to be tending towards more weird, and I'm excited.
That is part of their reputation.
It is. Now, let's see. So that was favorite unexplored thread. Was there anything you were hoping would happen in season 1 that didn't?
Anything I was hoping would happen in season 1 that didn't? No one died. Is the thing. No one died or ended up having to leave the crew. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't really want anyone to do that because I really liked all of the characters. But the narrative flavor that could have come out of Mort dying in that final fight with his father, or Trastero falling to save his friends, mirroring the way that he lost his friend in the first place and his backstory kind of a thing. There's just a certain narrative juice to those that I think would be fun. That said, I also didn't want any of them to die because or have to leave because they got too many quirks, because I wanted to finish exploring their stories and things like that. And like some of them I haven't even really got to start exploring their stories. We're gonna
we're getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting to that. I have questions. They're not on here. I have questions.
Sure.
So, and then kind of in the opposite vein, was there anything that was presented in season 1 that you would have you might have regrets or reserves about and wanted to have changed?
Yeah, there is one episode 5. I would have done things a little bit differently. That was the casino episode. One, that the villain of that episode, I would have done some different things with how I presented him and the and how I presented it. And then I also regret a missed opportunity with that episode to have put in an NPC that could have been there that I could have brought back to bite them later. No real spoilers there, but it presented an NPC. I realized there was an NPC that I had in my back pocket that was relevant and important that I could have put in that scene, and it would have added a lot more in terms of not just the scene itself, but also one of our characters' backstories and relationships. So, and I realized I really missed an opportunity there, and not to not to talk about it too much because it'll probably become relevant in season 2, but
Good to know. Interesting. Well, yeah, and I mean, you and I have talked extensively about season 1 because usually what ends up happening is we'll go play Genshin after, and it will just
Right.
be me raving about how you're a master of the game and everything you do. Oh, you're not.
Thanks. Great.
We're not even to the sappy part yet,
I know we're
motherfucker.
not, you asshole. We can't even do that now because Genshin's down for maintenance. So,
Well, that's why we're doing this interview. um, so talking about NPCs, and just to give us a little bit of a breather before we dive into the finale, for NPCs like the Flock, the Hunt, Silver Stag, the Ministry of Preservation Labs, anyone you want to talk about, were there any specific inspirations that you drew from while developing these NPCs and places we saw within the story?
yes, actually. So the Hunt is pulled from the Magnus Archives, almost wholesale ripped, as the
Yeah.
Hunt is one of the big 13 great old ones, and then whipped around, modified into a demon in some respect, give it a personification, make it a little less scary, but a little more interactable.
Yeah.
Less of this manifestation of an overarching fear and more of a tangible, interactable demonic presence. Is the thing. I really like the Magnus Archives for the most part. Don't get me wrong, it has some problems and issues, but I definitely like some of their world building and entities. So the Hunt, wholesale. The Silver Stag. The Silver Stag is heavily inspired by a casino from one of my favorite book series that you can't really see it. It's on my shelf over here. I think it's around. I don't know. It's over there. The Grishaverse series by Leigh Bardugo, specifically though from Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which is the duology that's in the middle right now.
Yep.
Absolutely adore those books. Absolutely adore the world building. Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom take place in a city that is very similar to Duskfall in a lot of respects. And on the water, a lot of that series takes place as the kind of home base area is along the water, where there's this row of casinos in an area called the Barrel. And so the Silver Stag is based off of a casino in that book. Beyond that, the Flock is actually largely by and by inspired by Crow and Rue's whole character. Like, basically, Rue made the character of the Crow and had this background with Skurlock, and I was like, I'm going to take that, I'm going to make a whole Flock, literally, and kind of just built off of that. And then each of the characters had their own individual inspirations, but as the Flock as a whole, there wasn't any particular individual. As for the Ministry of Preservation Labs, the Ministry of Preservation Labs is, for what you interacted with it, is largely inspired by Control. The brutalist architecture, the idea of how it's set up, and the kind of experiments that they're running there is very heavily inspired by the Control, which is itself inspired by another piece of media that I enjoy, SCP, and the kind of whole organization around there. So that was a lot of the inspiration in that. Beyond that, a lot of the overarching inspiration for a lot of groups and things in Duskfall, I do pull a lot of that from Dishonored, just in terms of how I categorize things and how I narratively describe things. So there's a lot of kind of filth and a lot of, like, the rats. It's kind of this very Victorian style gas lamp esque. Literally, that first episode that we did in the prison, the layout of that prison is wholesale inspired by the prison break scene in the first Dishonored game.
Yeah, that very first mission in Dishonored.
Yep, where it's just, instead of breaking out of a prison, they were breaking into a prison.
Which,
so
as we've discussed already, both of us really love Dishonored, so I loved getting to see that and being like, oh, I know where we're at in the layout right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, y'all, if you haven't played Control, Jaimie recommended it to me. Go play it. It's so good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go play Control. 100%. I also recommend looking into, if you like creepy pasta kind of style stuff, looking into SCP.
Yep.
Kickstarter has some issues right now, obviously with fucking crypto and things alike. But if you are
Yeah.
still doing Kickstarter stuff, there's actually an SCP Kickstarter right now for basically like big paperback editions of a lot of the collections of stories.
Yep. Yeah,
So
they just wrapped I know and the hardcover versions are also on pre-order, if I remember correctly.
yeah, and the paperbacks are what's being kickstarted right now.
Yep.
So go check that
So,
out.
lots of cool stuff.
If you like this kind of media, go there.
Yeah.
And check out Control for sure.
Yeah. So, hashtag not sponsored.
Not sponsored. Not even a little.
Now we hit the finale.
Oh boy.
Where I have all these questions are Archie related.
Unsurprising, of course.
Yeah. I'll start with this one. Because I wanted to talk about it earlier. When describing Archie as your favorite NPC to get into, the party asked, was there any major hints regarding the ending that we all missed?
Yes.
Yes.
Several of them. You know one of them, one of the major ones, because it was in the episode that you were in.
Oh, yeah.
One of the major hints that y'all missed was Mort literally pulled out a distillery, a cheap knockoff distillery of the thing that you stole from the Dimmer Sisters in the very first Session 0 episode. Not stole, got from the Dimmer Sisters for Archie in Session 0. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a excuse for Archie in my back pocket where he would have been very confused, of course. How the hell did that happen? Where did they get their hands on something like that? There's only supposed to be one of those in existence, and we have it. And then he would have gone in this spiel about how maybe they found the plans for the original somewhere. They have the paperwork, and that might be a thing we need to look into. And the reason it looks like such a poor knockoff is that maybe they don't have a complete plans for the original, which is why it doesn't look as good or it doesn't function as well. That was the big hint.
That was the biggest one.
Went over everyone's head.
Yep.
Like, I saw gears start to turn, but you picked that up at the same time the bomb got like turned on, so you're all like the panic got induced and it got left behind.
Yep. No, and that also hit my favorite moment from that episode, because you know me way too damn well, where you're like, you can guarantee the bomb goes off, but your time's cut in half. And of course I'm gonna say yes.
Of course you're gonna say yes. Absolutely. Beyond that, in terms of other hints, there were little things. How he responded to Skag specifically. And how he interacted with Skag. The fact that anyone with a basic modicum of common sense would not have invited Echo to the boat on that first job. Just things of that nature. There's a lot that just little things. The big one, though, the big one was episode 6 with the distillery. That was the thing that was supposed to make you suspicious. It did not work.
No, they love him too much. Oh, here's an easy one. Is Archie his real name?
Yes. Dr. Archibald Dalmore IV. That is his real name.
Let's see. Oh, I like this one. If Archie was a baked good, what would he be? And yes, I'm asking myself what tastes like betrayal now.
So baked goods obviously were a big theme throughout the entire show. It just kind of became a thing. It didn't mean anything. It didn't symbolize anything. It was just a nice thing to do. And it helped. It's one of those things that as a GM, you're like, there's literally no harm in doing this. It makes it's a happy little thing to give the players. It's kind of funny. Why not? And so like, it's just one of those things where it's like, I can throw a random baked good at the beginning and it kind of gets y'all into character and excited for the job. But in terms of if Archie was a baked good, that's an easy one. He's a raspberry tart. The reason for that being is it looks really fruity, but it's more sour than you thought it would be.
Well, Parker, I hope you look forward to making those. Because that was from her, obviously.
Unsurprised, as She is literally the one who baked a modified version of the baked good that I described in episode 5, 6?
5. It was the
5?
casino.
Yeah, the casino episode, yeah.
What media references inspired the true Archie?
Promare, again.
Okay, yeah.
From Promare, again. If you go look, for anyone who knows Promare, or if you don't, go watch Promare. And once you've watched the whole thing and you know who the main antagonist is and that kind of thing, he really was the inspiration for Archie and Archie's character kind of arc and all that. There is kind of a very big aspect of the greater good kind of idea, a little bit Machiavellian, which was also another inspiration for Archie, really is Machiavelli.
Yeah.
So that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Beyond that, The Lies of Locke Lamora. If you haven't read that book, I would go recommend reading The Lies of Locke Lamora. Read it and you'll know exactly who the reference to Archie is and what Archie's based off of.
I think that's also a touchstone for
Blades. It is
Blades.
a touchstone for Blades.
Yep.
It's just a good book also. I recommend it.
Yeah, it's on my to-read list.
Scott, I will say it does have a little bit of that classic 1980s misogyny in it, but for classic 1980s fantasy misogyny. But surprisingly for its time period, it was a little bit better than most. So doesn't mean it's still good, but take that with a grain of salt when you go to read it.
Yeah, good to know. Let's see. Okay, so I'll dive into a couple questions I have, because after that it's like the monologue and the masked figures. So we'll save that. First off, fucking phenomenal job at this finale.
Thank you.
Like you had me hyped since you told me that Archie was the main baddie. Back episode 3 or 4?
Right before episode 3.
Right before episode 3.
I had it absolutely 100% figured out by episode 2. I had it theoretically he was one of the possibilities for the main villain in episode 1, but like I had some ideas and options I was still playing with. Episode 2, I'm pretty locked down on Archie. And I told you a little before episode 3, and then you had to sit with that for 2.5 months.
And play a character who had no clue. Let's not forget that.
And play a character who had no clue whatsoever, which was absolutely hilarious to watch.
Yep. No, I just corrected his math homework instead. Watching you get into characters that feel like you're in your element. How did it feel to just play a nasty, terrible white man?
Oh God, I hated it.
Yeah.
It made me so uncomfortable.
We're talking about Vile Smasher, by the way.
Yeah, like playing Vile Smasher was like, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Don't get me wrong. There's something cathartic in playing someone that you know is just not a good person and deserves everything that's coming to them, and then to watch them get that, there is something cathartic about that. Embodying that character, it feels a little gross sometimes, and it kind of is a nice thing that, you know, I didn't have to be in that character for very long. That said, I think it is also an important archetype to represent in terms of individuals and their motivations and how people view themselves as being in the right and entitled, especially as someone who has had to interact with people exactly like Vile Smasher.
Yep. And then let's see. We got to see a little bit of it, but I feel like we didn't get a whole lot of Jackal. Like, we got the essence of Jackal, but the next thing I knew, he was dead.
Yep. Yeah.
But still, interesting character. It was fun to see.
Jackal was one of those characters who got really heavily influenced by a piece of media, in the terms of me watching a piece of media and watching the actors in a piece of media, of how they portray someone who is slimy and a businessman and that kind of thing. And literally learning kind of how they do not just body language, but vocal things and how they talk. So with Jackal and other individuals that I've gotten to play since,
Mhm.
specifically for you, Mordecai, in a game that we're in
Yeah.
that we've talked about. With someone like that, and when you can tell I'm trying to portray someone who is a little bit prim and proper and also a little bit
Mhm.
slimy, instead of talking like I normally talk, I start talking at the front of my mouth. I start
Yep.
talking up here. I get very percussive in how I talk. And then I
Mhm.
might add a little bit of an accent, depending. If I'm trying to go for something a little more posh, then I'm going to talk in this very succinct way where I am immensely talking down to you because you absolutely are the biggest fool that I've ever had the displeasure of having to work with. And if you could just listen for one moment, you incompetent ingrate. Whereas you can do the same thing talking at the front of your mouth, but then you kind of got to talk down here if you're going to do a bit of a con man kind of a thing. And you're like,
Yeah.
hey, look, Decky, I want you to help me, to want you, to want me, to want to help, to help. You understand? No, of course you don't. Listen here, Jackie. I have got what you need, and it's right here. It's this little vial. So, ever heard of this? Call it pyro on the streets. I'm pushing it for you. And you know what I'm pushing it for? We're going to make the big bucks, Jackie. We're going to make the big bucks. This is opposed to if I'm trying to give someone who's a bit more laid back, I'm going to try to talk more open mouthed and talk from
Mhm.
the roof of my mouth
Mhm.
specifically. That's how you get people a little more like Mort, or I'm talking from the hunt, or I'm
Yep.
talking from his dad, and kind of Jacoby Morrison,
Mhm.
the hunt kind of a thing. You start talking, you start moving the voice back, and
Yep.
it's a little bit more relaxed in a way, no less intelligent, no less
Mhm.
in control. It takes a certain amount of vocal control to kind of do that. Talking at the front of your mouth is actually a lot easier, is the thing.
Mhm.
It's talking at the back and getting that shift that takes like opening up your soft palate kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It just takes practice.
Yep. So there you go. Voice lessons from Jaimie Wolf, which I always love. I love your NPCs. So like, I was immediately I was carrying ready to stab Mordecai again, which is what happened in our last
Oh
session.
yeah. Uh
Almost
no.
happened anyway.
I Part of my background in that does come from a background of as a child I had to move a lot and
Mhm.
to different countries. Even I lived in England during
Yep.
a lot of my vocal learning when I was very
Mhm.
young in what we would call first grade, year one over there. A lot of
Yeah.
my primary development, and then I also grew up constantly going to the American South. A lot of
Yep.
my extended families in Alabama, Tennessee. I got some in Texas.
Mhm.
And you just
Mhm.
get a lot of when you're around those people, you get a lot of practice falling into that accent. It's really easy to me to do right now because I was just down there visiting family.
Yep.
But basically, that is a great place to start working on open up your soft palate, and then from there
Mhm.
you kind of work in the work in the vocal range, and then you can also start messing around with other accents. A great place to learn accents, just start listening to NPR and like copying the voices of people who
Hmm.
get interviewed on there.
That works really well. I'm so for that. Okay, a big one for a lot of us was Crow slash Silas confronting Vial Smasher,
Mhm.
s- summoning ghosts, and then we go to break. How did it feel coming back from break and seeing Rue?
I was so hyped and excited. Like I came back and he had done his whole makeup up. He's got the running mascara, the blood, everything. It was just like I'm like, yes, you have fully embodied exactly the feelings here. You have added a whole nother level to this scene than I was expecting. I'm so ready to go into this. Thank you. I did
Yep.
not ask Rue to do that. I did not require Rue to do that. I did not even know Rue was going to do that. And then they came back and they looked like that. And I was so fucking hyped for it. And then it just played so well into the narrative of everything between that and then with Asher and the throat ripping and the ghosts
Yep.
compiling and just the extra planar esoteric nuance of it and just like that. Yes.
It was very good. And kind of in that same scene, we get one of the first instances of Asher doing an aura read with the eye.
With the eye.
Now, I'm not going to ask you this because I think you know the answer, but I've asked everyone looking at Crow with all of those strings, all of them cut, save for one at the head. So far, I've gotten a variety of answers for that. I've gotten, let's see, Skurlock / the Flock, the Murmur Venture Project, like the crew of 4, and then Archie, which before Betrayal, so who knows? Maybe we'll see in season 2 if that string got cut or not. And you're doing such a good job of not showing any emotion for this, and I love it. Just like you did for a whole season with Archie.
Just like I did for a whole season, whereas you had to go stare at your phone to avoid giving away anything.
Well, only during the finale, because I was just getting more and more hyped, and I was like, I can't show it. I gotta calm down a little bit.
Yeah. No, I know. I remember.
It's so good. Go
Go
watch the finale again. If you've already seen it, I don't care. Go watch it. So good.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, no. That was I was waiting for Asher to do an aura read. I didn't know who it was going to be on. I didn't know when it was going to be.
Yeah.
But I was ready. So I had that prepped. And so the fact that they did it there and I just got to do that little bit in the background of like, here's like at a glance, Crow. Not an analysis of Silas or anything, but it is a good at a glance of Crow. Here's the person you're actually looking at, though. And then going into the depth about that.
Yep. It was so good. One thing that you constantly get complimented on is just like your descriptions. And yeah, not just for me. I was talking to people earlier this week about the show, and that was like their number one thing was just they popped in and they were immediately immersed because you were describing, I think we were at the part where Mort was meeting his father. And like the description of the burned demon and the teeth and everything, just so good.
Yeah. That is a learned skill. It's from watching others and then practice. It's just.
You already mentioned it. Asher going full rogue sneak attack mode was phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And the whole description there was really good. Then we drop down to the basement, which I'm kind of going out of order, but we drop down to the basement and we get the burned demon. Jacob B. Morrison. How did it feel to finally get to bring some of Mort's backstory front and center?
Yeah, so Mort's backstory is one of these things that's been quietly burning in the background of this entire game from the beginning. Mort's backstory, a lot of it has to do with his old unit. He was in the Imperial military and that kind of things. We got to see a little bit of that when he burned his uniform and kind of severed that connection for himself, which was a very impactful moment in that episode. We got to see a little bit of it in his downtime situations where he would go to see Marjorie and like help clean the gym or go do some boxing workouts or maybe have a drink with Marjorie kind of a thing. It was a lot of the quiet, subtle stuff in the background. And it was this quiet, burning thing that kind of, for Mort, influenced how he came to be associated with the Hunt also, is the thing in his whole backstory. And then to kind of tie that in to Jacob E. Morrison and putting Jacob E. in front of Mort, and Mort basically having to, in a very visceral sense, confront not only the consequences of his own actions via not only the Hunt and his backstory, but also to have a chance to confront on his own terms the thing that defined him and this nickname, the Mouth, that he hated. that he was given to him. It was his street name, but he hated it because it's a thing that he really didn't feel was not even earned. He found it semi disgusting, and
Yeah.
so to kind of have a chance to redo that confrontation, to have
Mhm.
the man in front of him who, because of him, he came away with this nickname and everything, and just to get to do it all over again,
Yep.
but in a way that he got to define by his own power that he had earned, that he had taken,
Mhm.
and that he had come into fruition through the hunt and his own actions. It just, to tie all that together with Jacob E. Morrison and to put a very real person, a very tangible thing for Mort to
Mhm.
confront is very good. And I really like how John played out his character with that.
It was a phenomenal, like we've mentioned it already. We both need the animated scene with the score and like all of the nasty transformations that happen during that with like the claws and the scale armor and everything else. I need all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Folks who did Castlevania, if you want to hit us up, that'd be great.
I love Castlevania.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying, and that I have a bunch of questions regarding Mort's backstory because the way I interpreted it and how John interpreted it were very different.
Mm-hmm.
Because I took it to mean that the mom's off in Tychros,
Yep.
and
With his sister. Yep.
with his sister. Okay, so John's correct. I thought the sister might still be at Dustfall.
No.
And
Well,
I
maybe. Who's to say?
maybe,
But John's mom,
yeah,
or not John's mom, but Mort's mom,
Mort's mom.
Mort's mother, and his sister,
Mhm.
after Mort's father was killed,
Yep.
which he was technically killed. He just woke back up.
Yeah.
After Mort's father was killed, when Mort's father woke back up, he quietly arranged to have
Mhm.
Mort's mother and sister sent to Tycheros.
Interesting. Okay.
As far as Mort's mother and sister are concerned, Mort's father is dead and has been dead this whole time.
Yeah, they didn't know he woke back up.
They don't know he woke back up.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm very excited to see what might come up in Mort's
Yeah.
backstory, especially now that the hunt's even more embedded.
Yeah.
In
It really was a story of the fall of the House of Morrison because,
yeah,
Mort came from a noble house in Doskval, but between the father dying, him being in a failed coup in the military, and then his mother and sister being sent off, the House of Morrison doesn't exist anymore in Doskval. It is, as a
yeah,
noble house, is fallen.
yep. And then so we get that very climactic fight, and then again a scene where we get we've seen this build up throughout the season of Tristero kind of having to step up and act as the leader. And especially with the handing off of the keys during the finale, to get to see Tristero have to pull Mort back up was so good. Such a good scene.
It really was.
Especially after goofing the fuck off and getting a safe in the meantime. But hey, they got paid.
They got paid. They usually find a way to get paid some way or another.
They do. And actually, I'm gonna go off on a quick tangent. We should probably talk about the fact that we thought Tristero was gonna last 4 episodes. We had a countdown.
we had a countdown if that man was gonna get a quirk every episode.
Yep. Because
and then he'd just be gone.
He would just be gone. Because it was all on stream, right?
Oh yeah. He didn't quirk out in his session 0.
Yeah. So
got close, but he didn't.
Fair. So that was really I love how Cole drives characters. Because we see the same thing over in Denari's house.
Like a stolen car?
Like a stolen car.
The fact of the matter is that I'm very glad that Tristero didn't end up having to leave because of how I built Marasi and into the story. And that how the same
Which,
trauma affected characters very differently.
speaking of Marasi, as the other person who knew Marasi was one of the masked figures, the fucking Hangman's gallows scene.
You didn't
This
know
is
about that.
I didn't, and this is where I go, how dare you?
Yep. This is the point where I had told Brandon prior to this. Brandon knew about Archie. Brandon
Yep.
knew about the masked figures who were going to be with Archie, and he knew that one of them was also Marasi. That
Yep.
was pretty much it outside of a season 2 thing that he knows.
Yeah.
But that was all Brandon knew going into the finale. He did not know about Jacob E. Morrison.
Nope.
He did not know about the hangman scene.
Nope.
He
I knew nothing about Bear or Vile Smasher or Jackal.
Nope. He knew absolutely nothing about Talia, aka Bear, or any of that. He didn't know any of that stuff. What he did know was that Marasi was going to be behind one of the masks. So when I put that hangman scene in front of him, y'all didn't get to see it because Brandon's face isn't on camera except in that one episode. He had to leave, basically. He had to turn around and fucking leave because we, the players / GM, can see the producer for the whole show, but y'all can't. And when I did that, he had to turn and like go to his door and like disappear from it just to like hide his face because he was not. He was not here.
No, you hit that scene, and the initial thought was, "Holy shit, Marasi's dead," and that's where I like started to react, and then it hit me, and I was like, "I gotta go. I gotta leave." It was so good.
Yes. And it had the exact effect on Tristero I wanted it to have between that and then revealing Marasi behind the fox mask.
It was everything. That was so good.
And I told Cole that at the end of the finale, he was not going to want to retire Tristero. Because Cole had talked about retiring Tristero at the end of this season, one way or another, for a long time. And then I threw it out there and I was like, I think it was episode 5. I was like, trust me, at the end of this season, you are going to want Tristero to be still around. And he's like, okay.
Sure, I'll believe you for now. Yeah, for a man who thought he was gonna have nothing left at the end, they sure had a lot left to deal with. So now we're outside. We've successfully taken out 3 members of the Firebug Generals. All that's left is Talia, who escapes. And that was with a fight with Silas and Rick. You pulled out the pocket watch device, and my brain went, do they have the fucking pocket watch that the Damned made?
Yes. So for those of you who don't know, there's a very special device that, to answer the question, no. Only the Damned have that. But there's a pocket watch that is the culmination of invention between one Echo and Wick that has the ability to freeze spirits in time temporarily. Basically paralyze them for a short period of time. It was a lot of work between Wick and Echo. Multiple downtimes of multiple study sessions, like multiple areas of work. It took us literally like 8 sessions of real downtime to make this thing. And this pocket watch is exclusive to the Damned. However, when I pulled out that pocket watch, I said there were 3 gemstones in there. And each of them was lit up for how many of the generals had been killed in the firebugs.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so that was the thing. There was 3 stones in there. When she pulled it out in their fight with Rick and Silas, and there were 2 gemstones lit up, and the 3rd one lit up, that was when the burned demon, Jacob E. Morrison, died. And as soon as that 3rd one lit up, she's like, all out of time. Such a shame. I'll catch you later, love. And then just disappeared because she was there on behalf of Archie just to make sure things got cleaned up. She was Archie's person on the inside to make sure that everything with the firebugs continued in a way they wanted to, and when the firebugs, it was time to clean them up, that it made sure that it got done efficiently. And so as soon as that was finished and the 3 firebug leaders were done, she's like, well, I'm done here. I'll catch you around. And then she was nothing but a distraction.
Yep. And it worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Because it kept them busy until everything was finished.
Yeah. If anyone had confronted Talia in the beginning, she would have kept them occupied for the entire session.
I could see that. Yeah.
She was not going to be a fight they could win.
That does not surprise me, and I can't wait. So, skipping it a little bit, is she the bull now? Or does she keep the bear moniker?
You're gonna make me go pull my notes up real quick to make sure that I know.
I'm pretty sure she has a bull mask.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just I gotta get my notes, and then I can have a definitive answer for you. Because did I give her the bull mask or the bear mask?
I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry to everyone in the previous interviews.
No, you're correct. She's the bull.
Yeah.
She's the bull mask. There is no bear mask. I didn't think there was a bear mask, but yeah, no, she's the bull. She is the bull. And like you could call her the bull, but in the kindled, the masks are a representation of the person underneath it. That doesn't mean that they're referred to by the name of their mask. Now, the players might refer to them by the name on the mask because that's all they know, other than Archie, Marasi, and Talia, who they know are the fox, the phoenix, and the bull, respectively. Everyone else might just get called by the serpent, the cat, the jester, the goat, the rabbit, that kind of a thing. Because they don't know who's behind the mask. But for the people who are in the organization who do know who's behind the mask, they probably have other names for each other, whether it's a nickname or just their fucking name. Yeah,
that's fair. That I am so interested in, like, I see this more in how you and I have played Blades in the Dark and then getting to see you run it. I love your use of mask throughout Blades.
I love masks.
Yeah. It's just so good. Now, before I get to the boat and the blue coat showing up, let's talk about the boat burning outside.
Oh, the boat that was supposed to be the Firebug's escape boat? Yeah, Archie blew that up.
Okay, Archie blew that up. Yeah.
Archie blew that up. Yeah, that was Archie. Yeah. I mean, if you want to be actually specific about it, it wasn't Archie himself. It was the rabbit, but it was Archie's organization. They blew it up.
Yeah, I had to make sure they didn't have a way out. Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, they did wait till a good number of them were on board, and then they blew it up.
Well, yeah, that's what you do as a person in DOSFall. You wait until the right opportunity presents itself. This is how Wick put a hole in Night Market. Like, even though that was a complete accident, and we don't worry about it.
We don't worry about that. Well, yeah, it wasn't just Wick. It was all of us.
No, it was all. It was specifically us.
Specifically us, the damned. You and I, and a literal warehouse full of Leviathan's blood.
Yeah, it happens. That is, as I was talking with our players, that's when they started figuring out, wait, something's going on. Like Talia leaving, the boat burning, they're like, someone's fucking with us.
Yeah.
And then we get back to the boat. You give them the perfect amount of a breather. And then the blue coats show up. This is one of 2 or 3 times in this campaign that you've kind of broke the mold on the Blades in the Dark formula. How did it feel to drop that on them?
I have been planning that specific scene since like episode 4. So dropping that specific scene on them, it was kind of just a relief in some ways, like taking something that had been sitting on my chest for 2 months and just finally like taking it off and being like, and implementing it and being like, did I hit this right? Did I do this the correct way I wanted to do it? Did I cover the usual escape routes? Did I put them in a situation to put pressure on them the way I wanted to do? Whereas like I harpooned the boat, so it is stuck in the harbor. Even if they manage to get the harpoons off, I've got boats on either end that are blocking their way. Down the gangplank, I've got the horde of bluecoats. So what they have to do is they have to figure out what they're going to do in this situation, how they're going to get out. And they did something I didn't expect. They decided to blow up their boat, take as much with them as they could, and go through a ghost door made by Silas, which worked so narratively more beautiful than anything I could have ever pictured. What I was expecting was that they would choose either to split up, to try to split the forces and get them one way or another, and like some of them would get away and some of them would get caught. As opposed, and that like specifically, especially the ones that had a lot of stress that had been eaten up, I thought were going to end up getting caught. But they chose such a perfect narrative way, and they really chose that in that same spirit that they built through the whole season of we all get out or none of us get out kind of a thing. And it worked beautifully, and it tied in so narratively perfect to what I wanted to do, because what was going to happen was my original plan was we're going to get to a point of whoever had been arrested would be arrested and would be pinned on the ground in some way. And whoever was getting away would be fleeing down an alley one way or another. And then there'd be this moment of like, we cut to that monochrome gray that I described where everything's frozen in moment. And then it was going to be like Archie as this omnipresent being above on a rooftop above all of them in some kind of giving his whole spiel, his whole speech and everything from this various points of view with these snapshots in time of like people running down an alley, someone pinned, like very that like end of Dishonored where they do the various snapshot scenes depending on your levels of chaos kind of a thing of like what ended up where. But the way it worked out so beautifully where it was just the one snapshot, or rather more like two snapshots of one snapshot of the boat in the process of exploding with the bluecoats like shielding themselves and our gang making it away on the nearby rooftop, like all coming out of the ghost door, like trying to skulk off into the darkness of Duskfall, and having that moment of frozen time coming still like just hanging in the ghost field and then getting to deliver that speech and end it there. It worked narratively perfectly. I think either way would have worked, but the fact that it worked out this way and that everyone got away, I'm thrilled. And it gives a lot of narrative flexibility now. Because one of my questions for the players going into session 0 before season 2, a little bit of a hint, is going to be, what has your character been up to for the last few months, kind of a thing. And if your character had gotten arrested, the answer was in jail, but it would have been more of a, what were you doing in jail? But no one got arrested. So we have a bit more narrative freedom and flexibility there. So, yeah.
I was in jail. Oh, I stabbed someone with my collarbone.
All right, we don't have to talk about Wick.
But speaking of the phenomenal villain monologue that Archie got to give, how did it feel to get to give that speech and watch their reactions in real time?
Powerful. It felt so powerful to be in this moment of, I'm going to deliver this entire narrative monologue. And in this moment, I am going to disassemble everything you've built. Everything you've done. I'm going to take every victory that you had, and I'm going to show how that as much of a victory as it was for you, it put forward the main plan of the antagonist this whole time, just to reveal of how much you were being manipulated from the beginning is the thing. And to get to do that and to watch their faces as they realized how much I took away from them. And then to pull in and be like, and be of this Archie knowing who Silas was the entire time, keeping him distracted when he needed to, having him on the side like that, and just controlling him in that way. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. And to watch their faces, to see Parker so angry with me for that entire speech was brilliant, especially when I brought up Helene and the Silver Stag and just the offense that Parker slash Asher took to that
Yep.
statement, and the betrayal in Silas for having been manipulated for this long. And there's just John as Mort, like embodying the like just another blow of just how empty inside he was, of like just kind of like sitting there taking it, unable to believe and unable to do anything about it. And then we've got like Tristero, who's just
Yep.
sitting there like, oh my God, I'm the master manipulator who got manipulated.
Yep.
The whole time. I'm the spider who got out-spidered.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things of where, and I guess, and if you're talking hints about who Archie really was, there's a reason Archie had foresight as the ability for the one job that they took Archie on. And it is because, at his core, Archie is, and always has been, a spider.
Yep. Oh, Stero and Archie are so very alike.
More than they could ever know.
Yep. That was something Cole talked about a lot, was like seeing those parallels now and being like, oh no. So you've given the dramatic speech. We cut to our outros and these final moments. And then I think you put probably one of the deepest nails in the coffin with Silas going back to their apartment in Six Towers to find a signed book written by Archie and a vial of kindling.
Yep. And this is one of those things with kindling also, with Formula 451 Omega. One of the things that makes it very special, one of the things that makes the kindled very special. Pyro, Formula 451 Alpha or Beta, the one that the more unstable version or the more stable version that allowed for the control of fire through the ghost field and its energy. In order to use it, you have to keep using it, and like you have the chance of overdosing. You take Formula 451 Omega once, and it unlocks something in you.
Oh. Interesting. Rue might be changing their answer about something. We'll see what they say. Well, with that, that's the finale. And then we can talk about the future, the bright and wonderful future of Dustfall, because that's definitely where we're heading right now.
The little bit of hope that always exists on the horizon.
Exactly. So, I'll get the fun one out of the way. How many more betrayals must we suffer? And I think the answer is
more than you could possibly imagine.
Yep. All right. Took the words right out of my mouth. Kind of in the same vein.
The truth of the matter is, no one's going to betray you more than yourself.
Ouch. I'm gonna have to have the awkward silence there for a sec. And so what are you most excited about for season 2?
The thing I'm most excited about for season 2 is we're going to come back to a city at war. We're fast forwarding several months, and this landscape of Dustfall is going to look very different. It's going to be a city where the entire city is in some form of an outbreak of gang war, one way or another, where the city is quite literally eating itself alive.
Interesting, because that was something that came up, was what Dustfall was going to look like, or if they would even care about the kindled. And because we talked about during our decompress, like the damned didn't know and didn't really care.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's going to change in a couple months.
That is. It is. There's a lot of things that are going to change. We're going to be fast forwarding several several months further, and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a very different city. Not in terms of physical landscape, but in terms of
Yeah.
the layout of the political structure and things. This is a
Mm-hmm.
city that is burning itself to the ground figuratively. You are going to be in the midst of, there is not going to be a single gang left in Duskfall that is not engaged in a war, except for maybe our protagonists.
Yeah. Depending on what they've been up to. Um, and of course, we will focus on kindling and the kindled and all of that. I did forget this question when talking about the finale, but how long have you known who all the masked figures are?
I still don't know who all the masked figured are, is the thing.
Yeah.
That's something that it still has a little bit of
Wiggle room?
needs to be tinkered with a little bit for season 2. That's why some
Yeah.
of the masks aren't revealed. For instance, for how long have I known the mask figures that I do know, which is to
Mm-hmm.
say, well, there's ones I'm not mentioning, but including Archie, Talia, and Marasi.
Yeah.
I have known Archie and Marasi since episode 2.
Yeah.
Talia was a character that I created specifically for her role in the Firebugs around episode 5,
Mm-hmm.
and then like became more structurally figured out as time went on. That I then got to. I was like, all right, so she's one of the big 8 kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, there's there's 2 other people who are that I know behind the
Yeah.
masks. That I've had figured out for one of them I figured out in episode 7, like after episode
Yeah.
7, and one of them I figured out literally during the finale. Like I like was in the middle of giving the finale and I figured out who
Yeah.
one of the people was behind the mask while I was doing it, and I was like, oh shit, I just thought of something, and just kind of, but I had to keep going, and so it
Yep.
just continued on through there.
I love that. I always love
So,
those revelations in the middle of a game. I know you and I have run into those several times.
But there are a few people who I still don't know who's behind the mask. That kind of goes into part of my planning going forward into season 2 and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, and this is, I've talked about this a little bit before in terms of planning, especially going into season 1, is session to session. Most of my notes for each individual session, not counting my overarching like story I was trying to tell notes, were about the size of an index card at most, except for the season finale. I had about 5 pages for season finale.
Yep.
But most of my notes for most of the sessions were about 5 or about an index card's worth of size, and then I had my general notes and things like that to refer to. So there are people I don't know who's behind the mask yet that I'm still working out. It's part of my planning for season 2.
Yeah. So, looking at season 2, this season 1 was a lot of Tristero and his dealings with his backstory. And we got a bit of Crow in there, and then Mort towards the end. Who are you excited to explore more during season 2?
Specter and Crow. It's going to be a lot of Specter and Crow. Mort's story going forward, should we continue to have the pleasure of all of our players, but having the pleasure of John's continued presence. Mort's story is going to be a story of him finding himself again in the wake of what happened. It's going to be a story more about the present and the future, and less to do with his backstory and how that. And John and I are going to have some character conversations and things like that for the future. I'm sure I have planned. Tristero's story is kind of an underarching theme to a lot of it, because Cole decided to make a character who was very intimately tied to Pyro and the overarching story. However, a lot of Tristero's story kind of cracked in season 1. We kind of hit like 90% of it. This last 10% of Tristero that we're going to hit in season 2 is going to be the fallout of that. Specifically, obviously dealing with Marasi, but also Archie, and the parallels between him and Marasi, and the parallels between him and Archie. And then Specter and Crow. The reason we're going to get a lot more of the Specter and Crow show here in season 2 is the idea, is that we really did not touch a lot of Specter, aka Asher Claw's backstory in season 1. Season 2, there's a lot more that's going to be there. And I think it's things that Parker is not expecting to be there, and some things that Parker probably is expecting to be there, but not in the way they expect it to be.
Yeah.
Is the thing. So I'm really looking forward to how that ties in together and how the string ties up there. Crow's backstory is one of having to question themselves and their own motivations, because they left Skurlock and the flock because they didn't agree with all the killing, and then they've now done more killing with the MVPs and because of Archie and all that, and they're kind of coming to terms with that. So a lot of Crow's story is going to be one of Crow finding their place as to where is the place that they are supposed to be, whether that dead ends in them back with the flock or with the crew of our crew of scoundrels, or wherever that takes them. But a lot of Crow's backstory in terms of their relationship with Skurlock and the flock has, I want to say, the opportunity to come up, but may or may not. It's going to depend on certain choices the crew makes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you literally threatened Parker with, I'm coming after you next, and
I did.
I can't wait.
I threatened Parker with your backstories intimately tied into the second part of this, and it's true. For the things that I have planned so far, Parker's backstory is already, or Asher's backstory is already all wound up in there.
Yep. And let's see. I'm trying to think if there was any other major things. I think that hits most of season 2 for me, because I know a lot of this we're going to discuss in session 0. Such as, they don't have a patron now. They're not really hawkers anymore either.
Nope.
So,
well, they don't have access to any of their equipment to make the drug they sell, the person who actually knew how to make the drug they sell, or any of that other fun stuff.
Yep.
So they either have to find a new product to push if they want to keep being hawkers, but given their motivations and the things they want to do, I don't think they're going to continue being hawkers. Beyond that, you're right, they don't have a patron anymore. So they either have to find a new patron or strike out on their own. And there are options and opportunities in that kind of ways. They also don't have a headquarters anymore. That'll be part of our session 0 talking as well. They blew up their own boat, which, like, they were going to lose that boat one way or the other. The way they chose to let that boat go out, though, was perfect. Anyway.
Yeah. Would you like to hear some of the opinions we had on patrons, or?
I would absolutely, because they're probably all patrons I've thought about and would be laying out for them anyway.
Oh, absolutely. So let's see. Helene has come up a couple times.
I'm sure. She is an option I had thought of.
With the caveat of, like, well, that's going to be emotional for Asher, so we'll see how Asher feels about that. There's Skurlock, which I know you and I have talked about already. And the interesting thing there was really, like, Crow's complicated feelings becoming complicated squared. And dealing with that. Then let's see, the Damned was the other, like, kind of obvious option.
The Damned is an obvious option, and it's one, let's just say that they chose the Damned. It would make my life easy, but it wouldn't necessarily make their life easy.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I think part of that goes into what direction they take the crew. Because, like, the Damned are assassins.
The Damned are assassins.
So they're going to get killing jobs more often if that's the case.
There's a certain level of, there's the Damned who are assassins, and they should go with the Damned if they really are going to fully lean into Hellbent of taking down Archie and the Kindled and all that. Helene is like an intermediary option where they still get to kind of define themselves, but they have this like sugar mama patron kind of a thing going
Yeah.
on. And like
Yeah.
Sherlock is if they want to really lean into like the weird and the occult. Whereas the Hive would be a good one to lean
Yeah.
into if they wanted to stay hawkers.
Yeah.
And that's really the only good reason to stay with the Hive.
Mhm.
Because that
'Cause
is what the Hive are
yeah.
best at. Um, Beyond that, you know, there's a couple other options, but those are really the big ones.
Yeah. The Hive came up during Cole's interview because we were talking about like changing playbooks, and that was
Mhm.
the exact comment of, if we want to stay hawkers, then yeah, the Hive. But also, do we still even want a patron?
Right. And if they
Because
go independent, obviously they have a bit more freedom, but
yeah, now it's more money to tier up and all that.
tier up, they might not get all the nice little pretty things that their patron sometimes brings them.
Yeah, there's that.
Like the nice fireproof armor that Archie gave them, or all
Mhm.
of the baked goods that they brought in, or, you know, the payoff that they got at episode 4, things like that.
Yeah. So I'll be interested to see what they pick. Some cast members have even talked about changing their character playbook.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So,
Is Parker about thinking about changing to a whisper?
not a whisper. You got the right person, wrong playbook.
Cutter?
Slide.
Oh yeah, I remember them talking about that now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
here's the thing. They're a lurk, right? There's plenty
Yeah, they're
of
alert.
good things from Slide that can be pulled
Oh,
from
yeah.
that into the lurk playbook because Blades in the Dark is flexible like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's realistically what's going to happen is start taking the veteran ability and getting some of those slide fun toys. I mean, much like we didn't get to this point in our game, but I remember with Leech, I almost went and got a couple. No, you were considering some
I was
spider
taking
abilities.
some spider abilities. I did take
Yeah.
a spider ability. I took Rook's Gambit. Or was
Oh,
that no?
that's
That's the
right.
slide. That's a slide ability.
Yeah, you took Rick's Gambit.
I took Rook's Gambit. Um,
I built a Hound. I almost took stuff from the Hound playbook.
yeah, Echo is mostly Whisper, but with a good helping of Spider and a little bit of Slide at this point.
Yeah,
They're the leader of the damned. We know that. So like
they're the leader of the damned. Yeah,
yeah. That's
and
what they do. I could see Mort starting to take things from Hound if he wanted to dip into there. I would see Tricero start dipping into Slide as well.
Yeah.
I could see Crow start dipping into Leech because of, you know, background with working with Archie and all that. And there's a lot of things that people across the board I could see them start getting interested in.
Yeah. I'm interested in that. It's well also Leech for Crow because Crow still got training with Echo and the Dimmer Sisters, which
Correct.
could lead that direction.
Correct. Demon
so
hunting training.
Really, yeah. Speaking of demons in season 2, you still have the hunt.
Still have the hunt, but he's not on their side anymore. His whole tit for tat thing with Mort's done. They both got what they wanted. Any interactions with the hunt from here forward probably aren't going to be the most amicable.
And I think everyone understands that now. Because yeah, there's a lot of discussion of yes, the overall plot is dealing with the Kindle, but then there's the subplot of, well, we've just released like a terrible demon on Dustfall because now it's ultra powered up and it's our fault. So I'm excited to see how they approach that problem.
You want to know why the Spirit Wardens aren't going to be more involved in our next season and the terms of the war that's going on in Dustfall between all the gangs? It's because they have a demon that they're trying to deal with.
Yeah.
And losing.
Yeah, that's the bigger thing, is the losing part.
And unfortunately for them, the damned are a little busy.
The damned, the damned are busy. Oh, I didn't know this. Now I'm on that crew. Interesting. So let's see. I think that's all I got for season 2. Before we get into closing remarks, was there anything you wanted to talk about in general? Ask me as the producer, whatever you're feeling.
I want to thank you, first off, for allowing me to.
No, that's during closing remarks. No, do it later.
Okay, fine. I won't thank you then.
Yeah.
In terms of questions I have, are you ready for season 2?
Fuck yes. I mean, no, I need the break,
We need
but
the break. Breaks are good.
but fuck yes.
Okay. And do you have? If you, Brandon, had been running this game, what would you have done
Yeah.
differently?
Oh, that's a really good question. I probably wouldn't have had Archie be the big bad, and that's not saying I would change it on purpose, just that that's not where my mind would have went with it. I personally would have picked somebody to build up throughout the season. Like, I might have taken the Foghounds a different direction, or built up the hunt more, or like a collection of demons more, and built something akin to the Kindled, but in a more straight up violent effort. Like,
Right.
you've seen me in our games. I'm more of the like front and center is your problem, go tackle it kind of
Yeah.
person. So to build something in the background in Dustfall is really interesting, but what I would do is probably push them more towards that weird early on, but then flip it back on them towards the finale.
Gotcha.
Where it's like the demons they've been interacting with. And if somehow my home game is watching this, you didn't hear a thing I just said, because all of these interactions with demons and the Dimmer sisters and whatever else they may be doing might come back to bite them if they stray too far into the ghost field without being prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we both have that, like, we love the weird shit of Dishonored and everything else. So for me, it would be bringing those elements and saying, you can do this, and like to an extent you can get away without the whole power requires sacrifice, but if you dip your toe too far, you're getting pulled under.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, is there anything you would have done differently as a producer on this show?
For me, so like part of it's like logistical things. I probably would have split the episodes into 2 parts for YouTube, and that's something I'm gonna do for season 2, just to like make it easier to consume. Because one thing I've really seen in the tabletop space is like 4-hour episodes are hard to watch, and a lot of people don't want to start it, pause in the middle, have to come back to it.
Yeah.
So
you'd like put a break at when we take our break, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and basically split it into 2 parts, upload them both at the same time, so we keep the same cadence that we have. But it would be, you could take them up in like 2-hour chunks rather than a 4-hour block. And that's something we'll try out with season 2. Something I didn't have time for that I would have loved to do is animated background, which we're gonna have in season 2. I've already started drafting it, and y'all have seen previews.
For your draft for that, also, one thing now that we've kind of tested and things like that is I might want the dice rolls on screen now this season.
I've already got a spot for it.
Okay.
So we're gonna adjust the cameras a little bit, and we're also, one thing that I've kind of seen across our shows on Huntsman's Hydra that I want to implement. It's going to be a little harder to do on the spot, but what I want to see is like when we do have say an Asher Silas moment, I want to be able to like make their cameras bigger and do like a focus shot, so we still get everybody's reactions, but like they're front and center. Things like some of those things that you notice in like game shows or like the reality TV shows where it's really good about having that focus shot. That's something I really want to bring in if we're able to like have the time to up that production.
Yeah, and that's a you thing, but I definitely see why we're wanting to have that.
Yeah. especially since a lot of the players have talked about wanting moments with characters that they haven't had a full interaction with, like Silas and Tristero was a pairing that got brought up because, especially after the finale, because they're both heavily betrayed by Archie, like more than kind of the most out of the crew. So like having something where you could easily pull up those cameras and be like, that those are the two we want to focus on, let's shift to that, would be something that if there's time for, great. Otherwise, I think as far as like how we handled safety tools and bringing everybody in for session 0 and making sure everyone was on the same page, and then doing decompress, which I've wholeheartedly stolen your decompress method because I love it.
That's not a thing we show on the show, but we do have decompresses after every session. Just so y'all know.
We've implemented safety tools. We of course have all the normal tools that Roll20 provides with like the X card and everything else that we can pull. And then we do decompresses where it's really about separating yourself from the character and then highlighting your favorite moment for yourself and then for anybody in the group. Which, if you haven't watched the interview with Rue, there's a whole section where we talk about it, and I think it really sums up like how it feels to run through that process.
Well, I haven't. It hasn't been published yet at the time of this interview.
No, but you'll get to see it, and it's great. Rue does a great job walking through it, and then I just make commentary. But let's see. Anything else I would want to change from the production side? I'm getting rid of the portrait frames because I keep having to move people. We're all too chaotic. Even when I was adjusting my own camera while playing Wick, because Wick does this.
Yeah, it's fair.
So just squares. Squares are better.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's the majority. A lot of it was just like logistical stuff. Otherwise, it ran smoothly. It's probably one of the most smooth shows I've ever produced. So all in all, 10 out of 10. Would do it again. I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, we got it season 2. Which this is also, I guess, your spoiler. This is a 2-season show. Season 2 is the end of Fire in the Dark for anyone out there. It's going to be, the first season is the first half of the story, and the second season is the second half. And it doesn't mean that's going to be the last time you see me and Doskval running a game in this world. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be repercussions for this game down the line. Doesn't mean that this is the last Blades in the Dark. But this is this story. It's 2 seasons.
Which, again, kind of going back to that digestible thing, we talk about how Critical Role is 100 some odd episodes. Good luck catching up.
Yeah.
Fire in the Dark's going to be like 20 max.
Yeah. And that kind of, in that vein, it is, I take a lot of influence again from actually, Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse, where the Grishaverse, there are multiple series set in the same universe. So like you can read the first trilogy. The first trilogy is a fantasy romance with mostly fantasy with a healthy dose of romance. The duology in the middle, which is my favorite part of the whole Grishaverse, the duology in the middle is a fantasy heist series.
Yeah.
And then the second duology is a I don't even know how to describe. The second duology is basically a classic fantasy adventure.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So like,
yeah, I think that's the closest you're going to get is just fantasy adventure.
Yeah. So like, and it's kind of that section of like, these are independently digestible. If you consume all of them, then you might get a little bit more out of it because you know there's these recurring characters that sometimes pop in from the others that you're like, oh, I know that person, and this yada yada, and that's why they're doing the thing they're doing. That's kind of cool. But they are independently supposed to stand alone, which is why it's going to be 2 seasons for Fire in the Dark. And then my next project after that, I don't know if I'll be coming back to Dustfall immediately. I might have a different game or thing that I want to run first for Huntsman's Hydra. That I don't know yet. I'm tinkering with things, but I do intend to come back, and we will probably see the return of various individuals, including the Damned, the Murmur Venture Project, in whatever form they take, and things like that, going into whatever the next show in Dustfall is.
Yep, and it will be so good. Let's see. Anything else on your end? So then now we hit closing remarks, which if you want to, you can say whatever you want about the channel, the cast, not your producer, anybody you want to talk about.
So first thing I want to say is I want to extend a sincere and just wonderful thank you to Duskball GQ's power couple, that is the Huntsmen's Hydra of Brandon and Mariah, for creating the channel for what it is, for putting as much work and effort into it as they do, for all the work that goes on in the background that no one gets to see, and for everything that they've done to make it what it is and the space that it is, from being a fun and comfortable and safe space to explore in, and a truly a player focused first kind of, and a people first kind of channel that I really appreciate. And I am incredibly thankful to have had the opportunity to have this show on Huntsman's Hydra and to have this kind of whole experience. It has been fantastic. So thank you for that. You and Mariah and the entirety of the Huntsman's Hydra. Thank you. The Huntsman's Hydra does a lot of good work, and there's a lot of great shows coming to Huntsman's Hydra. I am super looking forward to the Vaesen game that's coming, that's called Shifting Worlds. I don't get to be in it, unfortunately, just because of time and things like that. I did want to be in it. I did apply for it, but
at least you're in our off-stream game.
Such is the way things are. I'm fine with it. It's fine. Yeah. I'm not upset at all. But no, please, the Huntsman's Hydra is such a wonderful space to be in, and I highly recommend it. So have fun with it. Enjoy. There's going to be something here for you, even if the show that I've been helping to put on here as the GM isn't to your tastes. If Fire in the Dark has not been your fantasy, you will find something here that is, whether it is high fantasy D&D or horror or sci-fi is coming. Get ready for it. It's all going to be here. So check it out. Stick around. You're going to enjoy it. And so I'm just very thankful to you, Brandon, and to Mariah, to the channel for everything. As for the cast, my heart is very full and has been from the beginning. Because as I said to you and have told the cast before, I did not think anyone was going to apply for this show. I did not think I was going to get a single application, or if I did, I would get an application here or there from the couple of people that we knew, that we were friends with, who we played with before in the past. And so when I got to look at a spreadsheet of 30 names who had all applied to be in this show, people I'd never heard of, people I'd never met, people I did know, and I was excited to see. It absolutely, I almost cried. I was so relieved. And then to have had the option, and then to have just the power crew that we had with, it's just Parker, an absolute joy. My pick one saw their name down, and I was like, no questions asked. Absolutely. I will find a way to make it work. And then I got to see the absolutely incredible John Downey, a good friend of mine, the only cishet white man that we trust. Just to see John kind of in that group and being like, it was gratifying. And the whole crew brought so much, and I'm so thankful to all of them. Cole brought Tristero and just dove in so hard into the lore with his character and just added that little bit of a chaos element with Tristero. And then Rue came in, and I did not know Rue from the beginning, but Rue came in, wanted to play a Whisper, which was my favorite part of Blades in the Dark and immediately dived into the creepy aspect, gave me the engine to explore the creepier aspects of this, and then just did it so well. I was just, all of them brought such incredible chaos and empathy to the show that I had an idea and they told a story. That's what this show was. I had an idea and they told the story. I got to sit here, I got to throw my NPCs, do my weird little voices here or there, throw various jobs at them and be like, you're doing this now, you're doing this now. And they took it and they turned it into the character-driven story that I love. And they took this ragtag team of misbegottens and they became this found family situation that is one of my favorite tropes, and just kind of became this all or nothing with each other. And Archie was a part of that too. And to see how it worked out there in the very end is just, and to watch the impact that I was able to have on these players, to watch their emotional reactions and be like, I did it. I did it. I told a story and it made people feel things. And I watched them feel them. And I got to have that moment of excitement, and it would not have been possible but for the absolutely amazing cast that we had to work with. These phenomenal people, actors, empaths, and just storytellers, all of them in their own right. They are incredible people. And if you've had the opportunity and have watched all of their interviews as well, I'm sure you've heard them talk a little bit about themselves and where you can find them. I highly recommend going and finding and watching all of them in all of the things they do. They are wonderful. Yeah, that's kind of all I got.
Yeah. So that all being said, thank you all so much for joining us for Fire in the Dark Season 1. We look forward to seeing you in Season 2. In the meantime, please go check out Jaimie, myself, and our wonderful cast all over the internet. And see you next time, scoundrels.
See you next time, scoundrels.